Disney Channel original movies were like not a big thing in the UK. At least not in my friend circles or with anybody I knew at school. They definitely existed and were shown over here, it's just that no one cared. So I was shocked to recently find when researching for this video that some people in America have this huge nostalgia for these things. So much so that DCOM is just like a known term. Like you can go to somebody, hey dude, what's your favorite DCOM? And they'll know that you mean Disney Channel original movie. That's insane to me. Because up until like pretty much this very moment, I had never heard that term before. Am I old?
Also, I've read these things were like huge ratings deals. Am I out of touch? When did this happen?
Anyway, point is, I think the reason they didn't quite catch on over here is because, well, to be honest, nobody I knew even had the Disney Channel until cable became way cheaper and more the norm. I mean, you think my family was buying a Sky Dish? Nah, son. I'm not fucking Jeff Bezos. Secondly, the other reason they didn't catch on here is because whenever our British sensibilities were given the chance to glimpse upon their being, we picked up, using our stiff upper British lip, that they were absolute dog shit. I am sorry to anyone whose nostalgia I am insulting here, but 90% of these films are just bollocks. Just absolute patronizing after school PSA crap. Now, before you get all angry and irritated at us, I will admit that there were some exceptions. I remember when we eventually did get the Disney Channel that the quality in movies seemed to pick up a little bit around about the October time, with one in particular standing out a lot more than others.
I remember I always had these somewhat vivid memories of a movie from my childhood that I only ever caught in snippets once a year before it would disappear again. But that just made it all the more interesting and enigmatic to me. It always stood out as feeling way more high budget than the other original movies. It had better acting and a better script and set design. It had big scenes with lots of characters and extras all done up with makeup and elaborate costumes. It told a cool story about witches, and there was this massive pumpkin, and there was a skeleton cab driver with really cool practical effects that I just thought looked so great. And I used to remember it all took place in this world where it was always Halloween in some town, and I could never remember what the movie was called.
Turns out it was called Halloweentown. Took me years to find this.
So, Halloweentown. Here is a Disney Channel original movie that I can tolerate that also just so happens to be full of that wholesome Halloween spirit we're looking for this month. This movie tells the story of Marnie Piper, a 13-year-old girl who's a bit kooky and loves all things spooky. She's like a more upbeat Wednesday Addams, essentially. Unfortunately for her though, her mom tries to guide her away from these things, with Halloween in particular being something that she just point blank refuses to celebrate for reasons unknown. Luckily though, Marnie's grandma comes to visit on Halloween night, and she's a canny bit more liberal with all the spooky stuff. Anyway, during her grandmother's stay, Marnie hears her mother and her grandmother arguing downstairs, with her grandmother insisting that Marnie should learn about her secret witch heritage and start her witch training. So Marnie is all like, shit lads, I'm a witch. That's proper class that, like. I'm gonna follow me grandma and see what all this witchy shit's about. So her and her two siblings follow the grandma, and she ends up getting on this geek magic bus that flies to the titular Halloweentown. How did I not find this movie sooner? It's literally... the name describes the setting.
Digging this thing out again for this marathon, I was actually surprised at how well it held up. I actually watched a couple of other DCOM movies as potential contenders because there's a lot of them are, you know, Halloween themed and horror adjacent, but they all fell completely flat for me. And not just because the kids movies, they were just a certain kind of kids movie.
Ones where characters will dance and that's the joke, or where there'll be really ham-fisted preteen angst moment that's been written for a teen girl but clearly written by a middle-aged white male producer. Or there'll be ones that were about high school romance troubles, and that's fine.
Like, obviously I'm not the target audience for these things, so I'm not going to get my knickers in a twist about it, but after watching a couple of them, I almost didn't bother with Halloweentown at all. I kind of thought that maybe this enigmatic little film would be better as a cozy but foggy memory. In the end though, I decided to give it a shot, and what do you know? Halloweentown's just kind of straight up good.
What struck me immediately is how cheap it didn't look. The later DCOMs all seem to have this really clean quality to them, like they've got this almost uniform aesthetic that just screams Disney Channel TV movie, but Halloweentown didn't seem to have this. It just immediately looked more visually interesting than what I'd come to expect of these things in my brief dive back into them. I think interestingly, some of this is potentially by accident. If my understanding is correct, this was, I'm told, one of the first original movies for the channel, and so they probably hadn't developed a more uniform method of production at that point. They were probably still working out the kinks of how to put these things in a more mass-produced manner, and with things like green screen not being as accessible and CG still in its wonky phases even for some big blockbusters, never mind made-for-TV affairs, relying on that for things probably would have taken them way over budget. I mean, during production, the movie actually got cut from a budget of $30 million to $4 million, which is an insane downgrade. Which is why I think so much of the film is practical special effects, and that really makes the world feel tangible and lived in rather than cheap and made for TV. This hairdryer, for example, would probably have CG fire if it were made now, but that's just real actual fire this small child is blowing around. It doesn't always look amazing, and sometimes the budget shows, like some of the costumes and makeup look great and full body things and they're awesome, and then occasionally there's someone like this guy. That's just some dude in a mask. If they came trick-or-treating at my house, I'd turn them away for not trying hard enough.
This is a $4 million movie, and arguably my costume looks better than some of these. And look, this suit doesn't even fit me.
Having said that, while there are occasional laps of consistency and quality, when there's so many of these scenes with dense populations and so much of it does look really good, it's easy to forgive. Apparently they had to reuse extras loads and just change the costumes when they walk past the camera to give an impression of more people there, but it's edited and done in such a way that you'd be hard pressed to find the same person twice, and the town never feels anything less than alive with life. Add to that the very accidental benefit of this film being made in the late 90s. It has that 90s fashion, 90s hairstyle, that little bit of 90s film grain present on a lot of the camera shots. So watching it back now, it kind of feels like a period piece. I know, that's depressing. The 90s is a period now. It happened over 20 years ago. Like, think about it. If you were to make a film set in 2015 now, you could mostly just leave things as they are in terms of fashion and set design. But if you wanted to set it in the 90s and you wanted to get a house like this, and Halloween decorations like this, and fashion like this, that's like an expensive thing to do now. That was 20 to 30 years ago.
Jesus Christ.
So yeah, Halloweentown has a cool period piece aesthetic now, because it was shot decades ago.
Moving on, even without the novelty of being set at a time when you were happier and the world wasn't on fire, this film has a lot of fun set pieces and memorable sequences that just reek of the Halloween spirit it's really going for.
This skeleton taxi driver is a genuinely impressive bit of robot puppetry. This giant pumpkin centerpiece is a great bit of set design. There's a fun montage sequence where the kids go to a bunch of different places in the town trying to get recipe ingredients for a spell, and as a result you get to see a lot more of the different places these citizens might go. It's all canny stuff. The kids as well are really likeable, especially for child actors in a Disney Channel original production, which often have a reputation for being quite iffy. They have all well-defined personalities. I really like how ridiculously lame the brother is. He tries way too hard to be smug and smart, and he comes across as such a dork. It's great. Marnie is a fab lead with more than decent acting chops and manages to really sell the world with an effortless enthusiasm that bounces from scene to scene. And even the youngest kid I found totally endearing. In these kind of setups, you'd expect her to be the annoying tag-along they have to babysit and keep out of trouble. But despite her age, she's actually written as resourceful and smart, and is often the person to solve problems the group encounter. Like when she distracts a ghost when the brother finds himself unable to, or lets loose a dog to scare away a skeleton. She actually proves herself often to be the most useful sibling. Plus, she also shares a name with and kind of looks like my niece, so I was always going to like her by association. Also, I think an underappreciated aspect of this film is how prominently it features women without being a specifically gendered film. This film falls in roughly the same period of time as when Disney and others like them would consistently put out movies like The Princess Diaries, Cadet Kelly, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and lots of that ilk.
But unlike those movies, Halloweentown was never really a girls' movie, if that makes sense. Like, I don't even remember it being marketed to me in that way. They just sort of doubled down on the Halloween aspect of it. And as they should, because it's just a good Halloween film that happens to predominantly star and focus on female characters.
Very likeable female characters, in fact, with a strong family dynamic and a solid narrative arc that sees them come together in the face of adversity that threatens to drive bigger wedges between them. It's nice, wholesome Halloween fun, and probably the most accessible film in this marathon for the self-confessed wimps in my audience. So if you're looking for a cheesy little bit of spooky themed goodness this October, you can do a lot worse than Halloweentown.
And hell, if you really like it, the film even has 2 sequels that I've not seen that are apparently just as good. And a 4th film that's apparently hot garbage and recasts the main actress for absolutely no reason whatsoever, even though she was available. That's not as good news, but I don't know, it's there, I guess. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to subscribe to my OnlyDance so you don't miss tomorrow's. See you then.